Bonjour tout le monde! Today I'm back with even more little things that France does differently than the United States. You guys seem to love these videos just as much as I do, so let's jump right in. All right, number one, crutches. Now for my first 2 or so years in France, I had this impression, a wrong impression, that there were an enormous amount of people in my area who were disabled after seeing about 10-ish people per week out walking with these forearm crutches. And so you know what I mean? I'll just put a photo up here so you can see what I'm talking about. Now, in the United States, forearm crutches, I believe they're also sometimes called elbow crutches. They are most commonly used as permanent aids for people with disabilities or other health problems, and not just a temporary aid in the case of breaking a leg or knee surgery or something after an accident, right? So with this type of crutch, you slip your hand through the forearm cuff part and then you grip a handle. And I personally, let me know what you think, but I've always associated them with people who had a long-term need for a mobility aid because that's how this type of crutch was used in the United States. Just to give you an example, my French teacher in middle school, he had polio as a child and had a need for permanent crutches, and these forearm crutches are what he had. Also, on the popular TV show back in the day, ER, when I was a kid, I remember Dr. Carrie Weaver had hip dysplasia. She had these crutches. Now, in the United States, if you have a temporary injury, you're given underarm crutches called axilla crutches. And I feel like they're most commonly seen in the US if you have an injury. So, if a kid in school growing up broke their ankle, they'd have these underarm crutches. And they're taller than forearm crutches. They could be adjusted for height, and they rest here right under your armpits. It's just a different style, and I've actually never seen them used in France. So here I was, about 2 years after moving to France, never really brought up crutches to my husband Tom. It just wasn't a topic of conversation. But I thought there were just a ton of people in my area with disabilities because everyone had these forearm crutches. Young, old, everyone in between. This actually led to a funny misunderstanding between my French husband Tom and me about a year later, and it went something like this. I'm just paraphrasing. So we were on the street walking our dog, Dagny, who unfortunately has since passed away, but a teenager passed us on the street with the leg brace and winced with every step. And he had these forearm crutches, right? French crutches. And again, I'll put up a photo of these French crutches so we're all on the same page. So Tom says something like,
"Oh man, looks like he's really in pain."
And I was like,
"Yeah, well, not that it makes it any better, but he's probably used to it at this point, and I'm hoping he has a good team of doctors to help manage the pain and everything he's going through."
Me assuming he's had a disability for a while now, hence the crutches. So then Tom's like, why would he be used to it? You think he hurts his leg a lot? And I was like, no. It's just that he probably deals with a lot of day-to-day pain and everything that comes with having a disability. And Tom was like, disability? What are you talking about? And I'm like, well, obviously there's something wrong with his leg, And Tom's like, well, I think he just has a knee injury or something, What understanding between the French crutches and the ones we see in the US, it became clear. I explained to Tom what I just told you. Forearm crutches are most commonly used in the US for people with a disability, a permanent aid, and not just a temporary aid to use for a couple of weeks or months while an injury heals. Yeah, so Tom explained while he was laughing at me that in France, all crutches pretty much are these forearm style crutches. So if you're a 10-year-old with a broken ankle, that's what you're going to get. And if you're someone who needs a more permanent mobility aid, you're going to get the same thing. It's the same style. And we had a good laugh about the differences between these European crutches and the American ones. And for the record, French people often think of the ones we use in the US, these underarm crutches, as like old school and what soldiers used in World War II. And just if you're curious, the word crutches in French is les béquilles, les béquilles. All right, number 2, you can buy horse meat in France. Yes, horse, like Mr. Ed. And in France, you can find horse meat in most I don't want to say most grocery stores, but you'll find it next to the beef and the pork. And it's certainly not as common as beef or chicken. Every French person is not cooking horse meat for dinner each night, but it is common enough that you will see it. And I'll put up a photo I took just the other day at Leclerc, which is a mainstream supermarket here in France, Leclerc. And I would say horse meat, I mean, you tell me, but horse meat's not really something we eat in the United States, at least not now in 2024. And in France, it has fallen out of favor over the years. Although you can still find it, I'd say horse butchers are not quite as common these days as they were maybe decades ago. And it's not something I regularly see on restaurant menus either, but people do eat it and you will see it in supermarkets. All right, next, med spas, medical spas. Now, in a lot of areas of the United States, it is pretty common to see med spas when you're out and about. And I wouldn't say that they're popular everywhere, but, in, maybe wealthier suburban areas, there are places that offer laser services, medical grade facials, microdermabrasions, maybe injectables like Botox and other non-surgical treatments. And they do exist as standalone businesses, often very lucrative businesses. And they'll have a full office staff of doctors, estheticians, maybe nurse practitioners or physician assistants. And sometimes you'll see them in shopping centers or office complexes. I'm thinking of outside New York City and South Florida, where I most commonly visit. And they might be run by a dermatologist or a plastic surgeon. And they are big business, where I'm just thinking back to places that I've lived in the NYC metro area. But in France, businesses like this don't really exist in the same way. Let me explain. A dedicated business that's run by a doctor, that's a luxurious spa or medical office. And while, certain dermatologists in France, they may offer cosmetic services, it's a bit more low-key. It's not a big medical spa, right? Outside of big cities, services like these, if you want to get Botox in a smaller town, they're much harder to come by in France, even in smaller cities. So you might find a dermatologist who offers laser and cosmetic treatments, but it's not his or her main gig, and she's not part of a 10-person staff with a treatment list of 50 cutting-edge things that are big business. You get what I mean, I hope. In Paris, I'm sure things like this exist, but in the United States, med spas are pretty common. In France, again, you'll find spas that do massage and stuff like that, and businesses that offer laser hair removal, tattoo removal, but full-blown med spas run by doctors with all the latest and greatest cosmetic treatments haven't really taken off in the same way. All right, next, credit cards with points or miles or cash back. They're not really a thing in France. Now, I've mentioned this before that credit cards aren't widely used in France by everyday consumers. Debit cards, yes, les cartes bleues, they are. But not credit card or charge cards that function completely differently than debit cards that are commonly used in the US, especially when you want to accrue points or rewards. So I'm not going to repeat myself on the whole credit card thing. I've talked about that at length in other videos, but I do want to point out that not only are there very few credit cards in France for businesses, yes, but I just mean your average French consumer doesn't have one. But there aren't any rewards cards either that offer free points, airline miles, cashback rewards. And you certainly will not be getting, this is probably a good thing, you will not be getting credit card offers in the mail or to your email address like you often do in the US with all kinds of sign up and bonus offers. It's just not a thing in France. Personally, I have 2 US-based miles and rewards cards, including one for an airline that I use often, and also one where I accrue miles for every purchase. And I enjoy the perks. There's a lot of good things going for that. But just not a thing in France. All right, next, the treatment of ADHD and the fact that Adderall and other specific medications used for ADHD are not available in France. So yes, France may diagnose and treat ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, a little bit differently than how it's done in the United States. And people with ADHD that I know in France, they've explained to me that French doctors are not always up to date on the most current literature and research, and have definitely looked at ADHD and ADD as more of a behavior issue in kids rather than a neurological one, and they don't always take it seriously. And getting diagnosed as an adult can be even more difficult. So I'd love to hear from anyone out there who has either personally dealt with this in France, or maybe you have a child with ADHD. Share your story in the comments below, maybe to help others. But personally speaking, I have a friend whose adult son needed treatment for ADHD, and getting him evaluated here in France was a laborious, just very difficult process. Just finding a doctor who could see him was difficult, because I believe you had to see a certain type of doctor. She had to go outside the French healthcare system in order to get an appointment in the coming months. Otherwise, it would have been a very long wait. And she ended up paying out of pocket to the tune of several hundred euros to see this specialist. And I also knew someone who was putting the final preparations on her move to France, and when she realized she would not be able to get her ADHD medication, Adderall, in France, she called off the move because without her medication, since that's not available in France, she wouldn't have been able to function in her day-to-day life. Just like someone, with a heart condition who needs their heart medication to be healthy. For her ADHD, she needed her medication to be able to function and be healthy. And I believe Adderall, it's not just France, it's the entire EU that has outlawed it, or maybe it was never available here in the first place. But it's a class of medication that's just not approved. And by the way, ADHD in French is TDAH, which I believe is Trouble déficit de l'attention avec ou sans hyperactivité. So yeah. All right, next, putting grocery items directly into a bag while shopping at the grocery store. Now, something I learned very quickly when I moved to France is that it's totally normal to walk around your grocery store and have your reusable bag with you and just put items from the shelf directly into your bag. So if you're just running in for a few items, you don't bother using a shopping cart or a shopping basket, you just have your reusable bag. It's totally normal in France to just grab your milk or your fruit, whatever, put it right into the bag, and then you go to checkout and you pay, and then you leave. But in the United States, this might get you some strange looks. People will think you're shoplifting if you're putting stuff right into your bag. Security might follow you around because, people think you're stealing. Even though it's a shopping bag and you intend to go pay, I hope you intend to go pay, people don't view it the same way. Putting something into, a non-opaque shopping cart or basket, they just assume you're intending to steal. And to that point, just to illustrate this cultural difference, my dad sent me a photo when he was in New Jersey a couple of weeks ago at his local ShopRite, and he also saw it at Whole Foods as well. This sign here had it very clear at the entrance of the store. They do not want you putting items from the shelves directly into your reusable shopping bag, just to help prevent retail theft. And instead, they remind shoppers to always use a cart or basket. So you'll never see that sign in France because while people do steal, they're perfectly allowed to put things right into their bag. Now, I have to make a point of using a basket in the United States if I'm just getting a few things, because by default now, my norm is to take the items and put it right into your reusable bag, like people do the French way here in France. But I trained myself out of it one time when I was in the US with a friend, and she was looking at me like, oh my gosh, what are you doing?
Attenzione, pickpocket!
Thinking I was stealing. I was not. But yeah, it's just something I do in France, not the US. All right, next, mailboxes are locked with a key or just a slot. Now, in the US, homes commonly have a mailbox at the end of their driveway along the street, depending on how big the property is. That's a rectangular box, usually is up about chest level, hip height at least, that opens so the letter carrier can deliver the mail. Most can be opened by anyone, and they don't have a key. Some do, but most do not. And you could reach your whole arm inside in many cases. It's an actual box. Some are even decorative. I see a lot of ones in the shape of like fish. There's a manatee one that I saw by my dad's house in Florida. But in France, mailboxes are usually locked with a key. They tend to be square boxes built into the side of a house or an exterior wall. And I can't say I've really seen any decorative ones in France. They're also not big enough to reach your arm inside. There's just a mail slot for the letter carrier for like letters and small envelopes, and it's secure. Only the mail carrier can open it with the key, or you can, getting your own mail from behind. So you don't have to worry about nosy neighbors or the wind blowing the mailbox open and your letters just flying away. But yeah, mailboxes are definitely different in France. All right, next, homes are fenced off or gated in France. Now, in the United States, in many suburban areas, we have a front yard and a backyard, and the majority are not fenced in. Some people, of course, they do have fences, either just they like how it looks aesthetically, they have a fence around their pool, maybe they have a dog that they need to keep on their property. But it's perfectly normal in the US to drive around the suburbs and to see homes that do not have fences. If you're mowing your lawn in suburban New Jersey, where I lived my whole life, we could see both neighbors' yards on either side. So if they were out on their deck or they too were mowing their lawn, it's in clear view. You could wave to your neighbor, right? But in France, it's very common to see homes with front gates or walls that kind of obscure the property. And the backyard as well. They're often fenced, so that gives them security, privacy, even if there's no dog or pool. Now, where I live, each property line has a wall or a tree line type of divider. And although I can hear when my neighbor's mowing his lawn, I cannot see him if I'm out in my yard. And yeah, privacy and security, they're just handled a little differently in France. Now, something I always like to mention in my videos is that this isn't a judgment call on France or the US. No country's way of doing something is inherently superior to any other country's. Everywhere's going to do things differently, and I personally find learning about these differences really interesting. I do it a lot on this channel, and we can for sure have our personal preferences. I do. But of course, I'm not saying that France or the US is better across the board at everything, period. No, I'm not here to judge. My whole point on this channel is to help you to be more prepared when traveling or interacting with the French. And for non-American folks watching, I know a lot of French people do watch, to help you know what to expect when interacting with Americans or traveling to the US. So with that, I'm going to leave it here for today. Thank you so much for watching. I do have an ebook I'd love for you to check out called 75 Beginner France Tips for a Standout Trip. It has all kinds of relevant information for travel, money, transport, when you're dining out, cultural tips, and it's a way to support my channel. So if you enjoy what I do, check out the ebook linked below, and I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much, and see you back here on We in France soon. Salut!